Hi, I'm Wesley Smith. I'm the product manager for the FaderPort 8, and I'm going to talk you through a few of the things that you need to do to get started before you can start using the FaderPort 8 in your favorite DAW application. The first thing you need to do is go to PreSonus.com and either log into your My PreSonus account or create a new account and register your FaderPort 8. And once you do that, you'll have access to your FaderPort 8 user manual, which you'll want to read, and you'll also want to download Universal Control. You need Universal Control on Mac and Windows so you can do a firmware update. All FaderPort 8s require a firmware update out the box, and we've just made some new improvements last month, so you definitely want to update your firmware. And I'm going to talk you through how to do that. So once you've installed Universal Control on your Mac or PC, you can launch it, and it'll detect your FaderPort 8, and you'll see a little green update firmware button. If your firmware is out of date, it automatically detects whether or not your firmware is up to date or not. Click that button and then click OK. I want to update my firmware, and it'll start going. Now the update process takes a few minutes, but you'll see on every screen how close you are to all the packets being loaded into your FaderPort 8. And just like I said, takes a couple minutes. Go get yourself a cup of coffee, and when you get back, it'll be ready to go. All right, once your firmware is up to date, your entire unit will alert you to the fact that it's up to date by flashing and tell you to power cycle it. And so you just turn the power switch off and turn it back on. And it'll update your flash memory. It's totally normal. Depending on what firmware version you're on, your faders may calibrate, which means they'll move up and down on their own. If they do start to do that, let them do the entire calibration process. It takes a couple of minutes, but it's very important that keeps them in proper alignment. Now at the box, your FaderPort 8 ships in Studio One mode. So if you're using Studio One or Art or Mixbus, and a few other applications, Samplitude, you can go ahead and just launch your application. If you're not, you need to hold down the first two select buttons while you turn on the unit. And this brings you to the boot mode screen. So you can see we're in Studio One mode. We also have Mackie Control Universal emulation and Huey emulation. From here, you can also go to your setup menu. We have a few different setup modes that you can use to adjust your faders, so you can tune your faders, make them go faster or slower as you need. You can adjust the fader touch sensitivity. If you have cold hands like me, you might want to make them a little more sensitive. You can also go into a test mode, factory default, and you can also adjust the contrast of your screen from here as well. Once you're here, back into the boot mode screen, pick whichever mode you want to use. Again, if you're using Studio One, you'll want to use Studio One mode, or a DAW that supports native mode like Mixbus or Samplitude, go ahead and use Studio One. Mackie Control Universal, used for Logic, Live, Cubase, Nuendo. Huey is really only for Pro Tools. We've customized our Huey implementation for Pro Tools. And there's some special features in Pro Tools that you can use. You can read about those in your manual. We're going to go ahead and leave it in Studio One mode because that's what we're going to be using for the rest of the video. Hit exit when you're done, and your FaderPort will restart, and it'll save the boot mode. When you first open Studio One, you'll want to go to Configure External Devices. Most of the time, Studio One's going to already know the FaderPort is connected, and it'll set it up for you. If it doesn't for any reason at all, just click the Add button. Select the FaderPort 8 from the menu, and you'll send this receive from and send to menus to the FaderPort 8, and that's it. When you open up a new song, the FaderPort 8 will already load, and I'm just going to walk you through some of the areas of the FaderPort 8 just to kind of get you familiar with what's where. Of course, you have your transport section here, play, pause, stop, record, rewind, and fast forward, as well as loop. On, off, if you want to return to 0, you just press rewind and fast forward at the same time. This area here we call our session navigator. Each of these buttons changes the mode of this large encoder as well as the next and previous buttons. This encoder is also a push button encoder. It's just useful information. When you're in channel mode, you're going to be able to scroll through your channels, either with the encoder or with the next and previous buttons. When you zoom in, you use the encoder to zoom through your timeline and get closer or further away. and then you can use the next and previous buttons to zoom in and out vertically and make your tracks taller or smaller as you need. Of course, you have your scroll feature that lets you go through your timeline scroll, either with the encoder or with the buttons. Bank lets you go through your channels in banks of 8. This master button turns this encoder into the volume control for your master fader. So this allows you to always have your master fader. If you click it, it'll snap to 0, which is also a very useful feature. You can turn your click on and off. The section button lets you navigate through the events list, and your marker button lets you navigate through your markers as well as drop a marker by pressing that button. Up here we have all of our automation modes, and we also have some shift features. These shift buttons are either latching or momentary depending on how you press them. Press and hold for press and release for latching, press and hold for momentary. And they allow you to save your session, redo an event, undo an event, and then there's a few assignable user modes as well, which we'll talk about in a second. These buttons allow you to control what you're viewing on the FaderPort locally, so you can show and hide track types as you need, show and hide your audio, your instruments, your buses. Again, this is only controlling what you're seeing on the FaderPort, not what you're seeing in the session. That's independent. The FaderPort 8 has touch-sensitive motorized faders. Why is that cool? That means as soon as you start moving a fader, the DAW will respond because it's actually using your finger as the switch to let it know that it's being engaged. You can use these faders for volume control in track mode. You can use them to edit plugins. When I hit edit plugins, you can see that I can choose which plugin is on the track. I have the Pro EQ. Now I have all my parameters here that I can control as I need to. Sends, again, it goes to the sends of the currently selected track and lets me control the level there. And then panning. We do have the pan parameter encoder. This allows you to pan for the selected channel only. But if you want to set the panning for your entire session, you can put on pan mode and you can do it all from your faders. Of course, you have mute and solo for every channel and your select buttons. In Studio One, your select buttons will change color to match the color that you set for your tracks, which makes it, again, pretty easy to navigate, especially if you use color coding as your track management. Solo and mute clear do just what they say. They clear all the solos or clear all the mutes. You can arm tracks by hitting the arm button and then using the select buttons. And then, of course, we do have the arm all feature, which is a Studio One function. These buttons down here are specifically for Studio One. The link parameter button is a very unique feature. When you turn it on and you mouse over a feature function in Studio One, this is going to control that function only. And of course, you can lock it to that function as well. The macro opens up your channel editor, and you also have the bypass feature, lets you bypass the plugin that you're currently on or bypass all the plugins on a particular channel. So that's everything you need to know to get started with the FaderPort 8. For more information, you can go to PreSonus.com. Also visit your user account and get that manual and take a look at the setup features and unique functionality inside whatever DAW you're using. Thank you so much.